On October 26th, Israel launched a substantial missile strike on Iran. At the time, it came and went without too much additional discussion, beyond the basic headlines. It seemed that Israel had just struck Iranian air defenses, in particular almost eradicating all of the Soviet-era S-300 systems in the country. In other words, Israel was not hitting things of direct value, but rather making Iran more vulnerable to future attacks. Then came late word many weeks later that, in fact, there was a nuclear dimension to all of this. Of course, nuclear weapons are tricky devices. As a result, this news story comes with a lot of subtleties, like how Iran is fueling its nuclear weapons, what Israel's strike did to slow down Iran's progress, and how this fits into the broader puzzle of the preventive war game. So, let's cover them. But first, this video has an interesting origin story. If you watched 2 videos ago, you might remember that it ended with me unexpectedly discovering this very news article. As such, you would not be enjoying this video without today's returning and continuing sponsor, Ground News. You know Ground News as a news aggregator that collects articles published by outlets all around the world into a single feed, making it easier than ever to compare headline practices. Ground News will also even give you context about a source's political leaning, factual reliability, and their ownership. Here's the same story about the attack, but from a state-affiliated news organization with low factuality, while this one is from a media conglomerate rated with high factuality. And indeed, Ground News gives you a better understanding of what the news is covering overall. This story was heavily reported, especially by right-leaning sources. And that's why Ground News has a special feature called Blind Spot, which is a feed of stories that have little or no reporting by each side of the political spectrum. That is the type of thing that you cannot catch if you do not use a news aggregator. Ground News is the best in the game for that, and for a limited time, my viewers get 50% off their unlimited access Vantage plan, exclusively through my link, ground.news/will. So head over to that link or scan the QR code to better inform yourself and support the channel. You may just find serendipity like I did. Okay, let's begin with the basics. If you do not mind, please join me on a ride over the Islamic Republic of Iran. That big gray area toward the top left is Tehran, the country's capital. But we actually want to head 20 miles east. This is the Parchin military complex. It was an active part of Iran's nuclear program until 2003, when it was supposed to have gone offline. This is probably a good time to remind everyone that Iran claims that its nuclear program is not intended to weaponize the technology, but that Western intelligence does not believe that. Moreover, the most recent US assessment removed a standard caveat that Iran isn't currently undertaking the key nuclear weapons development activities necessary to produce a testable nuclear device. And though the indications are that Iran has not made a final decision yet, it is undertaking activities that better position it to produce a nuclear device. Isn't the intel game fun? Anyway, Parchin, having supposedly been offline, may help explain why the story went under the radar in the initial aftermath of the attack. For there to be additional intrigue, you would need to know that Israeli intelligence believed that the facility was up and running. In fact, because it was an undeclared site according to the International Atomic Energy Agency's protocol, Iran would have been in a tricky situation if it had publicly decried Israel for hitting the facility, and hence the story got further buried. Okay, that is the basic part. But what did Israel actually accomplish with the strike? Well, we are going to have to speculate on that, because no one is really going to tell us the exact details. In broad strokes, the intelligence leak claims that the facility was experimenting on conventional explosives. Now, I can understand why that is confusing. This is supposed to be about nuclear weapons, right? So let's take a step back for a second. There are 2 fuels that you can use to produce a nuclear explosion: uranium-235 and plutonium-239. Both originate out of mines like this one as primarily uranium-238 and need serious work to turn into something explosive. If you spin the uranium-238 in a gas centrifuge, then eventually small amounts of uranium-235 begin to concentrate. That is the beauty of the slight weight differences between them. Meanwhile, if you run uranium-238 in a reactor, then remove the fuel and reprocess it, you get plutonium-239. Both of these processes have unique challenges, so some countries might opt for one versus the other. In the potential Ukrainian case, it would likely be plutonium reprocessing, but that is a point for our next video together. In contrast, for Iran, its strategy has been to use centrifuges to enrich uranium from the start. Either way, though, enriched uranium and extracted plutonium do not just go boom by themselves. You need to manipulate them in a particular way to get the chain reaction going. Of all the potential ways to do that, there are two proven good methods. One is with a gun-type device, and two is with an implosion-type device. A gun type takes a cylinder of uranium and fires it into a hollow donut of uranium. Keep them separated, and everything is fine. But shoot the cylinder into the hollow donut, and the chain reaction begins. Then you get your desired outcome. The little boy weapon detonated over Hiroshima was this design. Meanwhile, an implosion-type bomb takes a ball of fissile material, usually plutonium, but could also be uranium, and has conventional explosives surrounding it. Trigger the conventional explosives at the exact same time, compress the ball, and begin the chain reaction. This, by the way, was the design of the Fat Man weapon that detonated over Nagasaki. The key here is that either of these methods require conventional explosives to work, either for the initial firing of the gun or for the implosion mechanism. Now, the intelligence leak did not indicate which model Iran was experimenting with, but if I had to bet, it is probably the implosion design. The gun design is incredibly simple. It is literally just firing a hunk of metal down a tube. You may still want to experiment with the method to get it right, but it should not take much. In contrast, the implosion bombs are finicky. They are worth it because they more efficiently convert the fuel into an explosion, but they are finicky nonetheless. If one part of the conventional explosive goes off a fraction of a second early, the ball turns into a pancake that maximizes the surface area to volume. See? Like this. Which is the exact opposite of what you want to do for a chain reaction to occur. Thus, you would want to experiment much more to see if you are getting that part right, before putting a whole bunch of incredibly expensive uranium into the device. To put this in the context of Iran's broader trajectory, assembly is the main step left in the country's nuclear weapons pursuit. The IAEA puts Iran at 142.1 kilograms of uranium-235, with 60% purity as of May 2024. For comparison, the Hiroshima bomb had 64 kilograms of uranium, and weapons-grade uranium is about 90% pure. Moreover, the 30% difference is not as much as it may seem. Naturally occurring uranium is less than 1% pure, and it gets easier to enrich as you go. All of that means that the vast majority of the centrifuge spinning has been complete, especially given other reports of traces of 83.7% enriched uranium. To sum everything up, it makes strategic sense for Israel to target the research facilities that aim to assemble a nuclear device, especially when Iran has not buried those complexes in underground bunkers. To finish, let's talk about this now in the context of the broader strategic picture. As a starting point, this is uncharted territory in terms of preventive strikes against nuclear projects. Israel's previous attacks against Iraq in 1981's Operation Opera and against Syria in 2007's Operation Outside the Box were on the complete opposite end of the preventive war spectrum. Both of the facilities struck were attempting to construct nuclear reactors, which would be something along the lines of 20 steps removed from actually harvesting a bomb. Even the manner in which the George W. Bush administration sold the Iraq War indicated that Saddam Hussein was nowhere close to a functional weapon. The allegedly damning piece of evidence, emphasis on allegedly, was supposed to be that Saddam was seeking to acquire yellowcake, a form of uranium that is a precursor to uranium hexafluoride, which is the thing that actually spins around in the centrifuges. It is further worth noting that it is the construction of the centrifuges that is the difficult part of the process, and Saddam did not have the industrial manufacturing capacity to build them. From Israel's perspective, in some ways, waiting this long is better, conditional on the preventive measures succeeding. All of the time, money, and effort that Iran invested into the centrifuge construction and uranium production would essentially evaporate into thin air. But there is a reason why I wrote down that phrase just now. The longer you wait, the easier it is for something to slip under the cracks. Then, one day, oops, Iran has a bomb. Regardless, it adds to the intrigue of the bilateral relationship between Israel and Iran. For decades, Israel has maintained a public policy that it would not stand by and watch a rival country in the region develop nuclear weapons. Hence the very forward approaches from Operation Opera and Operation Outside the Box. Yet, with Iran, Israel remained relatively quiet. Sure, there were plenty of unconventional efforts, like the Stuxnet virus, which aimed to force Iran's centrifuges to spin out of control. No laughing matter when they operate at levels faster than the speed of sound. You know, they would actually be quite beautiful if they would not kill you when they come flying off of their hinges. It also seems, by pure coincidence I am sure, that Iranian nuclear scientists had a hard time staying alive. But in terms of conventional military means, well, there was a whole lot of nothing. Naturally, the question became whether Israel was capable of launching an effective preventive strike. Looking at the map, in contrast to Iraq and Syria, the distance to Iran was much greater. Perhaps prohibitively great for Israeli pilots? Or maybe Iran had learned from Iraq's and Syria's mistakes, and not built every piece of its program in the open desert. Or maybe Israel was waiting, hoping to free ride off of potential US strikes. Or maybe Israel was worried about the unconventional retaliation that Iran could mount through its proxies in Lebanon and the Gaza Strip. Well, on the fourth point, Israel is already in the thick of that anyway. On the third point, maybe so. Or maybe Israel just got tired of waiting to see what the Iran hawks in a potential Trump administration might do. On the second point, Israel could still hit whichever targets were left out in the open. And on the first point, well, we now know that such speculation was flat wrong. Moreover, now that we know that Trump will be in office soon again, and that he is very much an Iran hawk despite the softer stance on Russia, one might expect that Israel will soon be getting more help. Israel has made a clear declaration that it is capable of striking Iran, and, again, it will be easier to repeat this process with Iran short on S-300 surface-to-air missiles. If Iran thinks that Israel has continued capacity to conduct these strikes, as if the October action was a signal of Israeli ability, then the best move is to simply halt progress on its nuclear program. There is little need for Israel to attack more if nothing is happening on that front. But if Iran thinks that it can secretly advance the program, now that is where things get complicated. Because if Israel figures it out, then we may see a much larger war come about. Sure would be a shame if something happened along the Strait of Hormuz. If you want to learn more about the broader conflict in the Middle East, we have a whole playlist dedicated to that subject. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.